Kia Stokes drives her knee straight into Caitlin Clark's quad. The referee is standing right there watching the entire play and still calls nothing. Clark limps back on defense and you can see it all over her face. This isn't just pain. This is pure frustration building up. After the very next play, she's yelling at referee Gerda Gatling. Then during the post-game press conference, she finally says what everyone had been thinking about Stephanie White. Stay with me because I'm breaking down every missed call against Clark, every phantom whistle called on Aaliyah Boston, and why this may have been the night Caitlin Clark finally reached her breaking point as she went nuclear over the WNBA's controversial officiating and coach Stephanie White after the Indiana Fever's loss to the Golden State Valkyries. Do you think Clark should finally leave the Indiana Fever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
She just jumped in there, grabbed the ball like it was nothing.
Clark wanted the whistle, gets the bucket. The fans wanted it too.
She's a little shaken up on that play too.
Yeah, Clark is very hesitant getting back. Not because she doesn't want to, because she is laboring.
Second quarter. The Fever have the ball, and Kia Stokes drives her knee straight into Caitlin Clark's quad like she's trying to knock her out of the game early. The referee is standing no more than 3 feet away with a perfect view of the entire play, yet does absolutely nothing. No whistle. No foul. No free throws. Nothing at all. The game just keeps going as if a WNBA superstar wasn't just hit in the leg right in front of thousands of fans and a national television audience.
Second quarter Fever ball and Kia Stokes plants her knee straight into Caitlin Clark's quad like she's trying to end her night early. The ref is standing maybe 3 feet away, has a clean look at the whole thing, and does absolutely nothing. No whistle, no free throws, nothing. Just play on like a WNBA star didn't just get drilled in the leg in front of thousands of people and a national TV audience.
And this wasn't just one random play. Golden State had been playing physically against Caitlin Clark from the opening tip, bumping her off screens, grabbing her jersey, leaning into her on nearly every possession, and the officials stayed silent the entire time. Go back and watch the first quarter, and you'll find at least 2 or 3 plays where a defender clearly pushes Clark off her spot without a single whistle. There was even another possession where she got caught while fighting through a screen and crashed to the floor, yet the referee simply stood there and watched like nothing had happened. By the time Kia Stokes drove her knee into Clark's leg, this pattern had already been building for an entire quarter. Everyone watching from home could see exactly what was happening except, apparently, the 3 officials on the court. Right after the contact, you could see Clark's body language completely change. She limped back on defense, clearly favoring her leg and barely bending that knee. The broadcast then caught a close-up of her face as she tried to hide the pain, but her jaw was tightly clenched and her eyes told a completely different story. That wasn't the look of someone frustrated over a missed shot. It was the look of a player dealing with real pain and the kind of anger that comes from believing nobody is going to step in and do anything about it.
Well, Caitlin Clark really upset about this last drive, and you see Veronica Burton on her, and then she goes into Kia Stokes and falls down. Maybe a little bit of contact, but you see when she gets up, she's limping.
And that's the part that really matters here because that one missed call didn't just cost Indiana a couple of free throws. It changed the rest of Caitlin Clark's entire night. From that moment on, she had to push off an injured quad every time she attacked the basket. She was trying to change direction on a leg that was swelling more with every possession, and there's no version of basketball where you can play through that and still stay in rhythm. Her explosive first step was gone. Her balance on pull-up jumpers started to disappear. Yet not a single whistle came to acknowledge what had happened. When Clark finally asked the officials for an explanation, Gerda Gatling told her that she had initiated the contact herself, as if Clark had somehow driven her own quad into Kia Stokes' knee on purpose. Think about that for a second because that was the actual explanation Clark received on the court for why a defender's knee crashing into her leg wasn't called a foul. Then compare that to what Clark said once she stepped up to the podium after the game. Her exact words were, "That hurts. The ref can't miss that. And then I have to play with a contusion in my leg the rest of the game." It's ridiculous. There was no sugarcoating it and no typical coach speak. Clark made it clear that the officiating took away her ability to play her normal game for the rest of the night. Right after that missed call, she didn't simply run back on defense and let it go. She turned directly toward Gerda Gatling and let her know exactly how she felt, loud enough for people sitting near the court to hear. She received a warning, somehow avoided a technical foul, and judging by her body language, she didn't seem to care either way. From that point on, Clark kept playing through the pain, favoring her leg on nearly every cut while still trying to push the pace and feed Aaliyah Boston in the paint as Golden State continued knocking her off every screen. And Boston was about to experience a different version of that same treatment.
Make a move to try to keep Burton off that rebound, and Clark is very upset. Gerda Gatling is giving Caitlin Clark a very long leash on the way she's reacting, and sometimes you just got to let the player voice their opinion.
Why was Aaliyah Boston, Indiana's best interior player, sitting on the bench for long stretches of a game they simply couldn't afford to play without her? That's the question every Fever fan was asking by halftime as they watched their all-star post player remain on the bench while the team desperately needed her presence in the paint. The foul trouble started early, and it piled up fast. Boston picked up her first foul on a play that barely looked like contact. It was a light bump during a post-up, the same kind of contact Golden State had been using against her all night without drawing a single whistle. By the time she was called for her second foul, the second quarter hadn't even reached the halfway point, leaving Stephanie White with little choice but to take her out before she risked picking up a third foul before halftime. The calls that sent Boston to the bench weren't just soft. Some of them looked like obvious flops. Golden State players were falling to the floor after contact that wouldn't even knock over a chair, throwing their heads back as if they'd been hit by a truck, and the officials bought it almost every single time. One sequence stood out more than the rest. Boston boxed out for a rebound, barely moved her arm, and the Valkyries player dropped to the floor as though she had been completely leveled. The whistle blew immediately. Boston was called for the foul, and she walked back to the bench shaking her head because there was nobody she could argue with who was actually willing to listen. Then look at the other end of the court. Golden State's post players were constantly banging into Boston, using their size and length to grab, hold, and fight for position on the block, yet they were allowed to keep playing without hearing a single whistle against them. That's the double standard sitting right there on the tape for anyone willing to watch it back frame by frame. It also connects to the bigger story of how Golden State defended throughout the entire game. They came out and jumped to a 12-2 lead by using their length to clog every driving lane and turn every catch into a physical battle. The officiating allowed that style of play from the opening tip, letting Golden State be as physical as they wanted. That fast start put Indiana in a deep hole before Boston had even picked up her first foul, and the pressure never eased. Every time Boston went to the bench, Indiana lost its only consistent scoring threat inside the paint, forcing the offense to rely even more on jump shots against a defense designed to make them settle for exactly those kinds of shots. No one else on the roster gives the Fever the same interior presence that Boston does, so her time on the bench didn't just cost her valuable minutes. It threw the entire balance of Indiana's offense completely off. Despite everything that happened, Aaliyah Boston still finished the game with 15 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocks. Take a moment to think about that. Those were the numbers she produced even after spending long stretches of the game stuck on the bench because of foul calls that didn't match the way Golden State was being officiated on the other end of the floor. Just imagine what her stat line could have looked like if she had been allowed to play uninterrupted instead of watching foul trouble take away so many valuable minutes. Put Boston's questionable foul calls next to Caitlin Clark's missed call on the knee, and the picture becomes pretty clear. Indiana's two biggest stars were affected by the officiating in completely different ways. One was being called for fouls that hardly looked like fouls at all, while the other couldn't get a whistle on contact that seemed like an obvious foul. And this wasn't just one isolated bad night from the officials either. Fans and analysts have been calling out inconsistent officiating in Fever games throughout the entire season. Even with all of that working against them, Clark and Boston still managed to put together performances that deserve real credit.
In the game and the closing stretch here.
And it could be something simple that we don't know. Obviously, we're not on the bench. We're not in the head of Stephanie White. It could be something that Timpson is giving them a look that Stephanie White likes right now and wants to keep going with.
And you see Coach White bringing in more sub to take some of these players out. You said it about game 44. I think you really have to conserve energy. Both Caitlin and Aaliyah Boston missed time.
Caitlin Clark finished with 13 points, 6 assists, and 3 rebounds. Look at that stat line by itself, and it might seem decent, maybe even respectable for a role player. But this isn't just any player. This is Caitlin Clark, the player who drives Indiana's entire offense, trying to play on a bruised quad that could barely generate any power. So the real question isn't whether those numbers were good enough. It's how she managed to produce anything at all after her legs stopped responding the way it normally does. Take a closer look at her shooting numbers, and the picture becomes even clearer. She finished 4 of 14 from the field and just 1 of 8 from beyond the arc. On paper, it looks like nothing more than a rough shooting night, but those numbers tell a completely different story once you understand what she was dealing with. Every time Clark tried to create space off the dribble, she had to rely on that explosive first step, the same push off the injured leg that was hurt on the play the officials ignored in the second quarter. She was still getting to her spots and still forcing defenders to help, but the quick burst that normally creates open looks simply wasn't there. The shots she usually makes with ease became heavily contested all night long. That wasn't the result of a shooting slump. It was the injured leg making every possession more difficult.
And miss. Gets the offensive rebound. Clark's behind the back. It's a Boston corner 3. That one goes down.
Clark gets a beautiful behind the back pass. Boston, a dynamic score from behind the arc, and you can see the bench loving every second of that.
Clark's 4 turnovers tell the same story from a different perspective. When you're playing on an injured leg, you lose your explosiveness on drives, you create less separation from defenders, and your rhythm starts to disappear on every decision you make in real time. Most of Clark's turnovers usually come from playing aggressively with the ball, taking chances because she trusts her quick first step to get her out of trouble. But once that burst is gone, the same plays that normally succeed become live ball turnovers because the defender she would usually blow past is still right in front of her, still close enough to disrupt the pass she thought was there. Sophie Cunningham, meanwhile, didn't just contribute, she took control of key stretches of the game on the defensive end. She finished with 10 points and 4 steals that came from great anticipation, hustle, and relentless effort rather than talent alone. While Clark was battling through an injured leg and Aaliyah Boston was fighting foul trouble, Cunningham was constantly jumping passing lanes and turning defensive stops into fast break opportunities. That was exactly the kind of energy and awareness a short-handed Indiana roster needed while its 2 biggest stars were dealing with injury and foul trouble.
Clark, known for her offensive ability, but here she's able to stay in front, get a hand on the basketball, shake it loose, and then on the offensive end, does a great job of feeding around the double team to get Boston wide open.
The rest of Indiana's bench did enough to keep the Fever from getting completely blown out, spreading the scoring around just enough to stop the final margin from becoming a total embarrassment. Even so, the offense managed only 75 points against a Golden State defense that was built to force exactly that kind of offensive struggle. That's the kind of performance you can survive for one night, but it's not a formula for long-term success. Everyone watching the game could see the difference.
Here are these half-court situations where the Valkyries are just so good. But Cunningham cannot miss!
Then there's Kelsey Mitchell, who logged 35 minutes in a game that had essentially been decided well before the fourth quarter even began. It raises an important question. Why was a veteran still playing heavy starter minutes and continuing to look for shots in a game Indiana had already lost by a wide margin? That's not just a rhetorical question either. Fever fans were asking the very same thing across social media as the clock continued to wind down. Mitchell finished the night with 20 points, and the timing of many of those baskets is exactly what's driving the stat padding accusations circulating among Fever fans right now. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark, the player who runs Indiana's entire offense, was limited because of her injury and minutes restriction, while Mitchell continued looking for scoring opportunities deep into a blowout that no longer had any real suspense left.
6 for 7 from distance game in the Fever's win against Las Vegas. Timpson down low, great patience.
This communication there in transition, a rare fast break bucket for the Fever.
Natalie Nakase wants a timeout as Golden State with a 1-point lead. Ruth.
The Fever trying to get something.
Put those 2-minute totals side by side and decide for yourself what this coaching staff really values on any given night. Clark spends large parts of the fourth quarter on the bench because of a minutes limit connected to injury management. Meanwhile, Mitchell stays on the floor the entire game, adding to a stat line that does nothing to change the final score. That's the reality nobody on this roster wants to say out loud. It was a losing night where the bench showed more fight than the offense. And when you compare one veteran's total minutes to a final score that everyone could already see coming, it simply doesn't make sense. The press room feels different after the game, and you can hear it before Clark even finishes her first answer. The opening question is about the missed call involving Stokes. Her voice sounds calm but firm at the same time, the kind of tone that makes it obvious she's holding back much more than she's willing to say. She doesn't avoid the issue. That hurts. The ref can't miss that. Then I have to play the rest of the game with a contusion in my leg. It's ridiculous. That's the complete quote, and there's nothing careful or softened about it. No coach speak. No saying she needs to watch the film first. She clearly says the call was wrong and points out how unfair the result was in the very same answer. Then the questions move to her playing time and why she spent so much of the fourth quarter on the bench. This is where Clark becomes quiet in a way that says more than words ever could. She doesn't criticize the minutes restriction directly, but she doesn't defend it either. That silence, sitting right next to her comments about the officiating, tells you exactly where her mind is after this game.
Tiffany Hayes leaves it short at the rim.
3 stops in a row.
Mitchell has been so confident and dials up a 3. Here we go.
Stephanie White takes a completely different approach during her own press conference. She defends the officiating as just another part of the game and explains the rotation as a plan built around Clark's long-term health. Put those two press conferences next to each other and the difference is impossible to ignore. Clark points to a specific injury and a specific missed call. White speaks in broader terms about a system and a long-term process. Those are not two people telling the same story. They sound like they're describing two completely different games. The reason behind the minutes restriction goes back to Clark's recovery from her back injury. The 25-minute limit was put in place to protect her body over the course of a long season. That approach made sense when she was still working her way back from a back issue that nobody wanted to rush. But that reasoning starts to lose its weight on a night when Clark had already taken a knee to the quad and was forced to play through the pain for 3 quarters. At that point, the minutes limit is no longer protecting her recovery. Instead, it ends up protecting her from a workload she was unfairly pushed into because of poor officiating.
Kaylin, can you take me through that second quarter play with Stokes that made you upset and then you hopped into the back?
I think that hurts. Like, the ref can't miss that. And then I have to play with a contusion in my leg the rest of the game. Like, it's ridiculous. Can't miss calls like that.
Did they give you an explanation right after when you...
She said I initiated the contact, which is fine. You can't knee me in the leg, knock me over.
That's the double punishment at the center of everything that happened that night. Clark takes a knee to the leg, keeps playing because no whistle is blown, battles through the pain to keep helping her team, and then still gets taken out because of a number on a minutes chart that doesn't know or care what happened to her in the second quarter. She gets hurt during the game, then ends up on the bench for reasons that have nothing to do with the injury itself. That's the kind of situation that can create frustration very quickly. And that frustration is exactly what's driving the speculation spreading across fan pages and sports talk shows right now. The conversation isn't just about Clark and White disagreeing on strategy anymore. It's about the idea that they may be pulling in completely different directions. Some analysts have even started discussing trade possibilities, suggesting scenarios where Indiana fully builds around Boston and Hull as the foundation of the team while moving on from the Clark and White partnership. No one inside the organization has actually said that out loud. Not Clark and not the front office. But the fact that people are even having that conversation tells you how tense things have become. So was this the night Clark's patience finally reached its limit, or was it simply another chapter in a situation that's been growing for a long time? If White and the front office can't find common ground on how to protect their franchise player, all of this noise could grow into something Indiana won't be able to undo. Take away everything else and here's what remains. Clark finished with 13 points and 6 assists while playing on a leg that was clearly bothering her. Boston battled foul trouble throughout the game, and Indiana still suffered a heavy loss to a team that played more physically and seemed to get away with it. Fans didn't invent this frustration. They felt it after watching the officials miss what looked like an obvious knee to Clark's leg, seeing White's rotation decisions raise real questions, and watching Mitchell play 35 minutes in a game that was already decided while Clark remained on the bench. Do you think Clark should eventually leave the Indiana Fever? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest updates, breaking stories, and game coverage. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.